Ok, buenos días. Pues vamos a tener una presentación, como sabéis, de Priyanka Kotamraju. Priyanka acaba de terminar su tesis doctoral en el Departamento de Sociología de la Universidad de Cambridge, en el Reino Unido. Ella además está impartiendo docencia en los grados de Sociología en esa facultad. El Departamento de Sociología de esa universidad es uno de los más prestigiosos del mundo, con muchos trabajos relacionados sobre cuestiones de raza, de discriminación, también de género, de antirracismo, feminismo y en particular también, como alguna vez hemos comentado, trabajos relacionados con la raza y el racismo en el contexto de Asia y en la India, ¿no? La cuestión de las castas, etcétera, ¿no? Después ya Priyanka nos contará. Priyanka estudió en una de las universidades también más prestigiosas de la India, una universidad pública, la Universidad Nehru, en el 2007 una licenciatura en tecnología, ingeniera en realidad, de origen, pero posteriormente se ha desempeñado principalmente como periodista durante más de una década en varios medios de comunicación indios, o sea que tiene experiencia en trabajo comunicativo, mucha, y gracias a algunas de las bastantes ayudas que hay, no suficientes, pero bastantes ayudas que hay para que estudiantes de la India puedan estudiar en el extranjero, en particular en el Reino Unido, pues pudo hacer un máster en desigualdad y ciencias sociales en la London School of Economics and Political Science, con lo cual es una persona experta en cuestiones de desigualdad, que es uno de los temas que le preocupan tanto en la investigación como en su, vamos a decir, en su dedicación profesional y, podríamos decir, también activista, ¿no? De compromiso social. En este contexto, ella, por ejemplo, ha sido investigadora independiente del colectivo Chitrakut, un colectivo feminista y anticasta que está centrado en las cuestiones laborales, el ocio y la salud mental relacionado con las mujeres, o sea que es un colectivo interesante también que aborda esos temas en un contexto como el de la India, donde, como ya nos contará, la cuestión de las castas pues todavía es polémica, ¿no? En el año en el que estamos, ¿no? No sé, yo casi 80 años, ¿no? Más de 80 años después de casi 80 años después de la independencia, ¿no? O sea, que estamos hablando en un contexto en el que no es un tema fácil, ¿no? También ha trabajado en el colectivo Samantha Arts, que es un colectivo que aborda las desigualdades a través de la expresión creativa, la cuestión artística, ¿no? En este contexto también hace investigación, como yo señalaba, entre otras está siendo asistente de investigación de un proyecto que se llama La Casta en los movimientos feministas de la India, dirigido por una profesora del Departamento de Sociología, también de la Universidad de Cambridge, Manali Desai, que puede también servir como referencia, otra investigadora que ha trabajado mucho la cuestión de las castas. Y finalmente, para terminar la presentación, ella, su tesis doctoral recién terminada, es una tesis doctoral que se titula Remaking Social Mobility, a Dalit Feminist Ethnography of War, Violence and an Everyday Agency, reinventar la movilidad social, una etnografía feminista Dalit sobre el trabajo, la violencia y la agencia cotidiana de las mujeres, ¿no? O sea que es una tesis doctoral relacionada con básicamente lo que va a contar aquí, ¿no? La sesión de hoy, Dalit o Dalit, no sé si bien cómo se pronuncia, mejor ella se refiere a lo que se había denominado la casta, o la mayoría de personas que denominaban intocables en la India, ¿no? Que sería como el sustrato más bajo de esa jerarquía social que hay en ese país. Y bueno, ya contará, pero es un término además que se reapropia como forma de resistencia, ¿no? Para esa, digamos, parte mayoritaria de la población, no en el sentido de que sea la mayoría de la población, pero que sí es la casta que más personas tiene, hasta donde yo entiendo, ¿no? En cualquier caso, Priyanka nos va a hacer una presentación relacionada con su tesis, lógicamente, que es su última investigación más potente, lo cual es un placer tenerla aquí. Y su presentación se llama Who Gets to Move? Caste, Gender and Social Mobility in South Asia. Y básicamente en castellano sería ¿quién puede ascender socialmente? ¿No? La idea es la idea del ascenso, las posibilidades de ascenso social o las imposibilidades de ascenso social, ¿no? Esa es la discusión de ese contexto, ¿no? En un país, por ejemplo, donde el crecimiento económico es muy fuerte, ¿no? Entonces, ¿quién puede ascender socialmente? Casta, género y movilidad social en el sur de Asia, ¿no? Las castas, además, no solo afectan a la India, también en cierta medida están presentes en los países de alrededor, en Pakistán, en Bangladesh, de forma diferente, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, pues yo quiero agradecer a Priyanka. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for being today here with us. Y ella pues hará una presentación de media hora y después habrá un debate, una discusión sobre lo que ella plantea, ¿vale? ¿Todo bien? ¿Lo veis bien? Yo voy a poner la cámara para que os vea, la mía, ¿vale? Okay, Priyanka, so then you have the floor. I will put my camera like that, and then you can see these beautiful students that we have here today. Really nice students.
Hi,
everyone. The best students in the University of Granada. So it's a pity you can't stay here to know them in person, but maybe one time.
Yes.
So I'm going to change the noise, the sound. Sorry, 1 minute. Wait. So now you have the floor, Priyanka. I will have to switch off the micro. All right?
Okay, no problem.
And
can we lower the screen a little bit so that I can see the students? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alberto. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Cambridge. I'm equally nervous and honored that Alberto gave me this kind invitation to be in this space with you and to talk about something that I have worked on for a bit as part of my doctoral research. And that is what I will be sharing with you today. And I hope that it will be useful to you, that you take away something that is not just about South Asia, but also that can be something that are lenses to understand the context that you inhabit yourselves. As Alberto very kindly introduced me, I'm Priyanka, and I've just finished my PhD at the Department of Sociology at the University of Cambridge. And I am really excited to be here. At any point in the presentation, I don't have too many slides, so at any point, please feel free to interrupt me or ask for clarifications, tell me if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if there are any doubts that you have. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. And also a little bit of a warning that some material refers to some violence. So please be aware of that. And in case you need to take a moment for that, please do step out or do whatever you need to do to take that time. With that said, I will begin the talk. The title of my talk is about who gets to move caste, gender, and social mobility in South Asia. I want to start off by telling you about a Dalit woman called Kalavati. I will explain what is the meaning of Dalit in just a little bit. So I met Kalavati when I start. Yes, I see a hand up there. Is there a question? Oh, I can't hear actually your. I'm just going to wait.
They were asking if it is possible to have subtitling in Spanish, so because there are a couple that don't speak in English.
Okay,
So that's the only question. No, your presentation is great.
No, no
You're
problem.
talking very well.
Because I just saw a hand up, so I thought, okay, we should pause and ask what happened.
That's the idea. That's why we have this camera. Then you have the possibility of. I told them that we already check if this is translating or not. It's not translating, so. It's not IA. It's only subtitles.
Okay, it's only the closed captions.
Tú lo puedes hacer, okay. ¿Se lo puedes explicar tú?
Sí, eso le decía.
Okay. So they already have the solution. They're más intelligent, you know. She's explaining that. Si lo podéis, yo no sé cómo se hace eso. Tú me lo explicas a mí también. No lo he hecho en mi vida. ¿Que lo va traduciendo con imagen?
Sí, un grupo de conversación.
Lo va escuchando y lo va... Toma ya. Okay. Wow.
You figured a solution.
Yeah, they got a solution with Google Translator because they got a translator, so the recording goes straight onto the translator and it translates on time. Yeah. Entonces, ¿lo tenéis todo el mundo? ¿Tenéis todas? Okay, they have already done that.
Okay. But in any case, if another option is that I pause at some time, and then if someone wants to kind of give the gist of it in Spanish also, then maybe that is also okay, because we have the time to pause and do that.
Okay, I'll tell them. Si de todas formas ella propone que si tenéis mucha dificultad en entender, ella puede pausar y yo mismo, quien sea, os cuenta un poco de qué está hablando. Si tenéis mucha dificultad, ¿vale? Bueno, lo decís, va a hablar, ella habla muy bien, se le escucha, se le entiende, o sea, el inglés está muy bien. Afortunadamente no es como otra gente en el Reino Unido, que no hay que, en el Reino Unido sería más difícil, ¿no? Entonces, tenemos ese vínculo además la gente del sur, que nos entendemos mejor, ¿no? Entonces, pues bueno, generalmente se le va a entender bien, a lo mejor con el traductor se le entiende bien, pero si veis que hay alguna forma que os estáis perdiendo mucho, lo decís, ella para y hacemos, ¿vale? No hay prisa, ¿de acuerdo? Yeah, I already explained them this idea. So
it will be more work for Alberto, but in case if that is necessary, if that's needed, maybe we can do that also.
All right, that's not a problem. I already done that.
Okay.
Time, so it's not a problem. I was taking notes already, so that's not a problem. I'm going to take notes in any case. So.
Okay.
But I tell them that only if they need that.
Yes.
Right? So they will stand up their hand and then.
Yeah.
That. All right.
Okay.
Great. So yeah. So you can continue. I'm only for 1 minute. I think we I'm not sure whether we can. All right. It's not. All right. So no, only because I need to switch switch off the microphone, right?
Yeah.
I'll do like that and then you start, right?
Okay.
Because I have to change. The microphone here in class is not working, so.
Okay.
Right.
No problem.
All right.
Thank you, Alberto. So please, again, feel free to interrupt so that we can iron out any issues that are coming up. Okay, so I'll continue. So I am starting this with the story or with mentioning this Dalit woman called Kalavati. And I will explain what Dalit means in just a little bit. I met her when I started my fieldwork in late 2022 in Chitrakoot, which is classified as a backward district in northern India in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And she is a social activist of some repute in the region. On the day of our meeting, the day when we first met, she had led a group of rural Dalit women to the local government bodies to demand access to clean drinking water for their village. She was accompanied by her daughter, who was named Bittu, and her 3-year-old granddaughter. By most measures, if we are to think about it, Kalavati is a success story. While she dropped out of school very early on in class 5, she was able to pursue education as an adult and acquired a graduate degree on her own. She had transitioned from informal work, from being a street vendor and a domestic worker, into white-collar work as a social worker, an NGO worker. And she had become the sole breadwinner of her household when her husband fell ill and shut his shoemaking shop. She had raised 3 children on her own, sent them to schools and colleges, and it was because of her sustained efforts that her household had acquired some wealth in the form of white goods, in the form of an automobile, a vehicle, cooler, a television, which is how she described that how she had progressed in life. Yet, throughout my fieldwork, whenever I spoke to her, whenever I asked her if she felt like she had made it, or if she felt like she had made her life better, she always replied, yes, I have stuff. I have a TV, I have a vehicle, I have a cooler, I have stuff, but I do not still command or get any respect. I'm still not free to do what I want to do. Life is an everyday struggle. So this tension between what Kalavati had achieved in terms of education and occupation and income, as we tend to measure it, and how she experienced what that progress meant, is at the core of what I decided to research. And this is what I want to kind of explore with you today. Let me give another example from another interlocutor that I met on the field, Meera Bharti. She's a 29-year-old Dalit lawyer and a democratically elected ward member of her local district, local government council. She's a political activist who is not scared of asserting herself and in private and public spaces. She told me about her typical meetings in these whenever the local government councils met. Usually there are no women present in these councils, although there is reservation for women to be elected, but usually women don't make it to these councils, and it is dominated by men and also non-Dalit upper caste men. So at one of these meetings, which was presided by 2 upper caste male members, she calls them, the titles that she gives are Panditji and Shuklaji. The titles are surnames of these people, indicating the caste, indicating their social location, that they are from higher status upper caste locations. So because she's a lawyer, she wore her lawyer's coat, her black coat, to the meeting. And seeing that, the upper caste male members remarked, oh, you have come wearing your lawyer's coat. And to this, Meera Bharti replied, you're wearing a shirt. Did anyone ask you why you're wearing a shirt? I wear a lawyer's coat because I have done a law degree. I have studied law for 3 years and I have earned my right to wear it. This is why I wear it. Did you get a degree to wear your shirt? Hearing a woman and a Dalit woman talk to male members of the local government council, they were taken aback. They were taken aback at the way in which the woman was asserting herself. And they replied to her, they said to her, you are a very dangerous woman. And she said that, no, I'm not dangerous, I'm educated. So I can reply and I can say, I can assert my rights. What do we again understand from Meera Bharti's example? Like Kalavati, on paper, she too is a success story. She has educational achievements, she has occupational achievements, she has income achievements. Yet she is viewed in public spaces and private spaces as a space invader. This is a term that is coined by a scholar called Nirmal Puwar. Space invader, which means a wrong body in a space that is not designed for them. And A space invader is a wrong body that is not granted recognition or belonging. Is it because of her caste location or gender location or class location? Is she too Dalit? Is she too female? Is she too poor to experience upward mobility and to earn respect? So what I will kind of try to show you through the research, through my doctoral research, is what Dalit women's experience of being upwardly mobile, of pursuing social mobility, tell us something. What do they tell us? What do they tell us about social mobility itself? What is the role of non-economic dimensions, which is not income, which is not education, which is not occupation? The role of non-economic dimensions like agency or like experience tell us about how an individual experiences life chances. So to kind of like start at what is social mobility? What do we understand by social mobility? At its most basic, social mobility refers to the movement of individuals or groups between different positions in a society's system of social stratification. This means moving up or down or staying at the same position in a social ladder. For example, moving from lower to higher levels of education, or from informal work to formal work, to professional work, to salaried work, from lower prestige occupations to higher prestige occupations, from lower class to middle class to upper middle class. We talk about social mobility all the time in industrialized or Western societies like the UK and the Europe and the US. There is a vast amount of literature and focused government attention on improving social mobility through policies. Especially in the UK, there is something called the Life Chances Act that looks at improving people's life chances, that is people's equality of opportunity, to be able to improve that. From various reports that you can look up from 2021, 2022, 2023, we see that social mobility in the UK is recorded as at its worst in almost 50 years, which means that children who are born into poor households are finding it harder than any point to move into higher income brackets. And when we look at added characteristics of ethnicity, say British Pakistanis or Black Africans or Black Caribbeans in the UK, then you see that they continue and consistently earn less than white men in the same occupational or professional job positions. So the social mobility research generally tends to ask where you are born, in terms of class location, in terms of gender location, in terms of caste location, religious location, color. Does that determine where you end up? What is your origin position and what is your destination? So this is the picture for UK or for industrialized, westernized societies. What I did in my research is to take this concept and to apply to a society like India or South Asia, where the society is organized or stratified not along the lines of class, but along the lines of caste. So here I would take a little bit of time to kind of introduce what caste means, or what is this concept of caste. Let me also share, okay, window, yeah. I hope you can see this. So this looks like a pyramid. This is broadly what an Indian societal structure looks like. So what is caste? Caste is a hereditary, that is by birth, and hierarchical system of social stratification that is quite specific to the South Asia region. But its influence, yes, I can see a hand. Do you want me to zoom Is that more visible? Okay. Okay, so caste is something that is specific to South Asia, but its influence can be seen globally through the presence of diaspora communities. Oh, I'm so sorry. Through the presence of diaspora communities all over the world. At the ideological level, caste is traditionally organized around this principle or idea of purity and pollution, which means that certain communities by birth are considered to be ritually pure, and some are considered to be ritually inferior or impure. And some groups are considered so impure that they were called untouchables. So the Dalit groups are these formerly untouchable groups who occupy the bottom of this hierarchy. So if you see in the diagram in the pyramid, you have these broad classification of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and ex-untouchables, that is the Dalits. This is a hierarchy of stratification of Indian societies. So Brahmin classes consider themselves, Brahmin castes are given the position of highest purity, and Dalits or ex-untouchable, formerly untouchable communities are given the position of the most impure communities, and so impure that even their touch is seen to be polluting. And that is the ideological basis of caste, which comes for the most part through the Hindu religion, which is the majoritarian religion practiced in South Asia. At the economic level, what does this mean? Caste identity has been linked to specific forms of labor. That is, communities are then associated with occupations that are defined by their caste position in the hierarchy. For example, higher caste like Brahmins, as you see on top of the pyramid, were linked to occupations of priesthood and education. So that even if you think about it, if that was pre-modern, in the pre-modern era, you think that there is the need for priests, there is a need for ritual, a lot of rituals to happen. So Brahmins occupied that position. In the modern society, in modern India, what it translates to is Brahmins having acquired a lot more education and a lot more accomplishment through that education in better jobs, in higher positions. Yes, I see a hand there.
Podría hablar.
What is the caste system based on ethnicity or this economic position?
Can you hear her?
Yeah, I heard that question. So caste has three bases that I'm looking at. So caste can be explained through an ideological basis that comes through religion, which is, say, the Hindu religion gives it the salience, but that is found in other religions also in India, because caste travels. Caste is present among all individuals and groups and communities in India. But the basis of that, the ideological basis of that, comes from religion. The economic basis of that is when these caste identities in this hierarchy are linked to occupation. What occupation or what jobs you are allowed to do. So, for example, Brahmins at the highest point of the hierarchy are associated with priesthood or associated with pure jobs or higher education, higher prestige, higher status jobs.
Sí, great. Well, they're asking if it's possible to make it a little bit bigger.
Okay.
The pyramid, no?
Yeah. 1 second.
Because the class is quite long, so those who are in the back, they don't see it very well.
Okay. Are you able to see this a little bit? Because then, yeah.
Sí. Sí, sí, sí. También, en un momento dado. Si queréis, lo comparto. ¿Cómo lo mando? En el grupo de WhatsApp, que es más rápido.
Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible, but they're asking those who are in the back that if I might give them the link. So I will send them the link in very quickly. Just 1 minute. Yeah, I will send them the link. I will do it with my mobile, so you don't have to.
Okay.
You have to care. So. Eso es que yo estaba pensando del móvil de quién tenía yo, de quién de vosotras, vale. Vale, pues te lo mando entonces a ti, tú se lo pasas a ella para toda la clase. Venga. Okay, you can keep going. That's great, ¿no?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
¿Lo oís bien aquí, no? ¿Se puede oír aquí o preferís el...?
Sí, bien.
Okay, para así es más fácil no tener que estar... Vale, okay. We'll do it this way. You can keep going. You got the floor. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So lower caste, like if...
No hace falta. That's great. You can keep going. Great.
Okay.
Sorry.
So if Brahmins are at the top of the hierarchy, then if we look at the jobs or the occupations that are linked to lower castes, or say the Dalit communities, usually those jobs were considered to be impure, those were considered to be low paying and manual, like shoemaking, like an industry of cobblers, or leather work, or manual scavenging, midwifery, or weaving, artisanal work, or washing sort of work, laundry work that manually is undertaken. So these are all jobs that were considered and linked to lower castes or untouchable, ex-untouchable communities, and given that kind of a low status, an impure status. Agricultural labor, which is almost in slavery-like conditions, in bonded labor is what we call them, in slavery-like conditions, or even sex work, is associated with impurity and associated with low caste status. So that is the economic basis of caste. So we've seen the ideological basis of caste and then the economic basis of the caste. The third basis of caste underpinning this sort of stratification is the social basis of caste, which means caste location in which you are born into will dictate or determine who you can marry, who you cannot marry, where you can live, which is then seen in the form of segregation in the village or in the urban areas, who you can share food with, who you can accept food from, who you can share water with. These are called commensal practices, who I can dine with, eat with, hang out with, accept water from, whose house I can go to, who is worthy of respect, recognition, and belonging, who is worthy of status. So that is again the third social basis of how caste is, how caste stratifies Indian society. So here, as you can see in this pyramid structure, these are the broad classes of castes, but at the unit level, what we are studying is caste, a group of people that are born into a particular social location. And that social location cannot change as much as you move up in the hierarchy. So you may be born in a poor household, you may be born in a rural location, and you may move to the city. And because you acquire education, you can get a better job. You can move from agricultural job to a professional job, to a salaried job. You can become a corporate person. But that doesn't change your caste location. Your caste location remains the same. So the ideological, economic, and social basis of what determines how much you will get paid, who you can be friends with, who you can get to marry, and what kind of glass ceilings will you encounter in your job, what kind of respect that you will garner in these situations. So this makes the study of social mobility quite difficult and complicated in India, whereas in a class-based society, I can move and change my class. I can move from a lower class or a middle class to an upper middle class. I can acquire income. I can acquire wealth. I can acquire social and cultural capital and change my class position and find acceptance. But with caste, it is much more difficult to do that because you cannot change your caste. So the question is that, this is what sociologists and social scientists predicted. As modernity will come to India, as we move from the colonial times after independence, once neoliberalization comes into India, these traditional forms of caste will dissolve, will disappear. And all these linkages of caste with particular pure and impure occupations, these practices of untouchability, these practices of who is pure, who is polluted, who you can marry, who you can't marry, these sort of cultural norms and practices will disappear. This is what social scientists thought, that let development happen, let neoliberalization come, let modernization happen, and naturally these old traditional forms of of boundary making or of stratification will disappear. But that is not what has actually happened. You can change, you can move from a caste-linked occupation, which is you can move out of agricultural labor, or you can move out of sex work, you can move out of leather work, and move into secular occupations. Secular occupation is like, I am a university researcher, or occupying any sort of position in the corporate world, or transitioning into professional jobs or salaried jobs. Those become secular occupations which do not have these traditional linkages. Yet the shadow of caste follows you there. Somehow this is something that you cannot get rid of, or somehow this is something that shadows you into the social life that you start to inhabit. You move from rural to urban areas. So all this modernization or neoliberalization that was supposed to take away these traditional forms, somehow it is not able to. And in fact, what we find is caste is reappearing in newer forms, in more modern forms. It is adapting itself into how it can be reproduced in newer ways, where practices of untouchability, which are illegal, which are unconstitutional now. No community or no person can be untouchable in India anymore, in South Asia anymore. Yet these practices persist because these are social norms, cultural norms that have been conditioning Indian society for over thousands of years, at least 2,000-3,000 years. It's very difficult to let go of something that is internally conditioning you and externally also getting reproduced within structures that people are moving into. I'm going to give you some examples, which are, news reports from the recent past few weeks, just to tell you what it is to be a Dalit person in India. These are, you can call them as social facts, as Emil Durkheim, the sociologist, would call it. So, for example, there is a recent piece of news that came out that a primary school in North Indian city threatened a Dalit girl, a 10-year-old Dalit girl, with expulsion, to expel her from the school if she did not clean the school toilets. So the assumption is that school enrollment, primary school enrollment and higher school enrollment in India has reached almost 90% plus. So every student can go to a school, can go to a government school, get education. But if you are a Dalit student, if you are a Dalit girl, like in the example in this case, the teacher and the principal and the school itself is expecting that you are okay to clean school toilets, because this is the traditional linkage of the caste location of this person, of this girl, as impure, as low status, as Dalit, who should be cleaning school toilets. That is what their work is. That is what traditionally is how we look at them. Another example is government institutions in India. Again, the bodies that look after higher education institutions in India, that is national universities and deemed universities in India, have realized that over the last couple of years since the pandemic, since COVID, there has been almost 120% jump in discrimination against students who come from lower castes or from Dalit castes, Dalit and indigenous castes, particularly. I'm sorry. So there is a provision to protect, which is called the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. But basically, the higher education bodies have a set of rules to protect and safeguard against discrimination, against caste-based discrimination. Once the government body has issued regulations, this happened almost just 2 weeks ago, that we have noticed that there is a 120% jump in discrimination against Dalit students. So we want to implement our safeguarding policies to protect discrimination, to guard against discrimination from happening. There was a backlash. There was a counter protest. There was a counter protest by upper caste communities, upper caste students who protested on the streets and who took out campaign slogans which said, "Bring back untouchability." Can you imagine a modern society like India asking for a practice like untouchability to be brought back because they want certain students to not benefit from being in the same social spaces and inhabiting and having equal life chances? Again, to look at violence data, to look at caste violence data, which is tracked by a particular act in India, you can see between the last 3 years how the number of cases reported have risen, almost 50,000, more than 50,000 cases every year. And the crimes, the caste crimes, what is the kind of nature of violence against lower castes or Dalit communities or Dalit people? The crimes range from hurt, criminal intimidation, rape, assault, social distancing, which is again a practice of untouchability, a practice of purity and pollution, and discriminatory practices. As I told you, one of the social basis of the caste stratification in India is who you marry or who you don't get to marry. So a way this caste is reproduced is by controlling who women can marry. So women are strictly forbidden, or it is very rigid. It is very strictly policed who women fall in love with, who women are allowed to marry. They are allowed to marry, or families police this love and intimacy and marriage of choices of women and men very closely. So this is recorded again in Indian government data and also non-government data as caste-based honor killings, which is when an inter-caste couple fall in love and get married, the kind of violence that is visited upon them. So again, a recent example, just to tell you, this is about from August 2025, about a young Dalit man who is a gold medalist, a topper in his university. So he has educational attainments, and who became a software engineer. So he's cast off his traditional occupational linkages and moved into a secular occupation and lives in Madras, Chennai, which is a cosmopolitan city in the southern part of India. Falls in love with a higher caste, a woman from a higher caste. He's met with violence, and the family of the woman hacks him to death. I mean, I apologize for the language, but the violence is so brutal. So the young Dalit software engineer is hacked to death. What kind of a society this is a caste-based society. This is a caste stratified society where the choice of who you have to marry is also so violently and intimately policed. So, which is, again, coming to my point about understanding social mobility. Social mobility is the ability to move between positions, between the position of your origin and the position of your destination, to be able to have those life chances, those opportunities to design what life can look like for you. So here, how the caste system of India cannot really be equivalent or equivalently understood to the Western societies which are divided by class. So caste is doing something more and something more rigid than what class is doing. So we try to see Indian society through the structure of caste, into which class is folded. So into which the economic well-being or the financial status of a particular group is folded. So class comes within caste. So the way this hierarchy is sort of explained, why certain castes are higher status and why certain are lower status, to explain this hierarchy, how do we explain this hierarchy? So what is the concept that we use to explain this hierarchy? So here is another concept that was conceptualized by a Dalit thinker, a Dalit social theorist, and a Dalit political activist who is considered the architect of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Now, I want you to kind of maybe just remember this name, because Ambedkar, this is quite an important theorist whose work that I do use not just in my research, but how he's associated with the way Dalit communities think about themselves and assert themselves and express resistance and forms of agency. So Ambedkar conceptualized this concept called graded inequality. And if you want to refer to where this comes from, the reference is a landmark work of his called Annihilation of Caste, which means that how do we dismantle something like caste? And he wrote a seminal paper on it, and it was actually a lecture that he was supposed to give, but that did not happen, so he kind of published it. But in that, he introduces this concept called graded inequality. It's not just inequality. It is not categorical inequality, which is a binary form of inequality between oppressor, oppressed, or bourgeoisie and proletariat, or, with the boss and the worker. This is called graded inequality, which means it is a division of labor and a division of laborers. So what he means by this is that different groups, caste groups, are organized in a hierarchy, occupying different position, which means that every group in this pyramid, as you see, every group is simultaneously an oppressor and oppressed. So they are oppressed by the caste that is above them in status, and they are in turn oppressing the caste that is below them in status. And here the pyramid makes it look like there are 5 classes and there must be 5 castes, or something like that. But no, castes are in India, in every particular region there would be hundreds of castes. So you can imagine that, a population of 1 billion people that is organized into these caste groups that have various subcastes within them. So like my surname, as Alberto was introducing, is Kotamraju. And Kotamraju belongs to a particular caste, subcaste in a bigger caste of, say, Brahmin. So I will fall within the Brahmin class, Brahmin caste, but my surname indicates that I occupy a particular position in even Brahmins. So I am a Brahmin caste with no agricultural land or no property. So I do not have the status which a Brahmin caste will have that has agricultural land and that has property. So they will be higher in status than me. So similarly, across the, across the hierarchy, across the pyramid, different groups are arranged in this. What I really want you to understand is the graded nature of inequality means that everyone has a stake in maintaining the hierarchy, because I get to suppress someone below me and I get oppressed by someone above me. So that is how I kind of maintain what my status position in the hierarchy will be. And that happens through the three logics of caste, which is, again, economic, ideological, and social. So like I explained, the economic basis, so occupational linkages, so graded inequality operates through these mechanisms of caste being linked to occupation, even when these traditional forms are moving into more secular occupation. The second thing is caste being controlled or policing through women's sexuality, female sexuality. So the boundaries, they become biological boundaries of caste are drawn when women are policed into who they are marrying, who they cannot marry. So in terms of preserving the caste purity. The third point that Ambedkar also talked about in what graded inequality does is that this is an ascending scale of reverence and descending scale of contempt. So I am contemptuous of the caste that come below me, and I am looking up to and I'm trying to emulate the castes that are above me. So which is why there is the interest for me to maintain my status position by holding my position in the hierarchy. And this is important because this tells you why solidarity or social cohesion is so difficult to achieve in Indian society. So like Western societies, which see categorical forms of inequality, the peasant classes can resist or organize against landowning classes, or the binaries are set up between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, just very broadly speaking. That is not so easily possible in India because, or in South Asian societies, because of this caste stratification, where everyone has an advantage to be gained while also experiencing disadvantage. That's why it becomes harder to understand how will anyone experience social mobility or real social mobility. What does that actually mean? So, okay. So what does the current social mobility literature in India kind of tell us about what modern India is experiencing? So the picture that we get to see is that they call it continuity and change, which means that Indian society, after the neoliberalization since the 90s and modernization, experiencing modernization, has experienced some form of fluidity in that hierarchy. It's not as rigid as it was, say, during colonial times or just post-colonial times. It is not that rigid. There is some amount of fluidity that an individual or a group can experience in Indian society, which means that more children are getting educated, are having more educational attainments than their parents. So intergenerational mobility has improved. So this particular generation, my generation, has more educational accomplishments than my parents' generation. And this is across castes that you can see that this has happened. I can earn more income in the position, in the jobs that I'm seeking than my parents. Again, this is something broadly true of all castes. You can get better wages or better incomes. So these are intergenerational improvements, and that is absolute mobility has improved. So this is the change that Indian society is experiencing and some amount of fluidity that they are experiencing. However, the structures of caste continue to dictate how much of this movement you can experience. So individuals who are born into lower castes, or individuals who are born into lower status, or ex-untouchable communities like Dalit communities, tend to remain in those positions. The caste doesn't change, but also in terms of the financial status, in terms of social status, that has not improved. So the rigidity or the hold of caste continues to be there. So that is the continuity part in the Indian society. So I hope everyone is with me and following. If you guys need a break, do tell me, then we can just take a break for 2 minutes and then come back. But if not, I'll just carry on.
We continue.
We continue. Okay, great. Okay, so this is what the picture of social mobility is in India. So then in terms of my research, what I tried to do is identify what are the gaps that are remaining in studying social mobility in India. What are the things that we don't know, or what are the things that are understudied, and what more can we find out? How do we explain what kind of social mobility a South Asian or Indian society experiences? By the way, an important point to note is that India has some of the lowest social mobility rates in the world. That's a quantitatively documented fact. So what are the gaps that I have identified through my research? So the first thing that I identified is that existing models of social mobility, which are primarily quantitative models of social mobility, which track social mobility through educational attainments, occupational changes, and income attainments, tend to treat mobility as a movement between point of origin and point of destination where you end up. But what they do not, what they have not actually kind of studied properly or in full is how gender shapes this experience of mobility. In fact, this problem of gender being a blind spot, or social mobility being disaggregated by what gender does, is a problem with social mobility studies all over the world. I think the focus on gender is something that is relatively recent. So debates about how to include women or whether to include women in social mobility research have been ongoing in sociology for a few decades. And the conventional argument is that women's labor market positions, that the occupations that women are found in, do not really add to our understanding or do not really differ from what we broadly understand by measuring social mobility through men's achievements. Generally, all the measurement of social mobility also tracks fathers and sons, and default studies are about default men, in compositions or in educational attainments. So disaggregating by what a gendered experience can tell you how a woman is moving through, climbing the social mobility ladder is something that studies have not focused on very much. In India, that focus has been quite less. So my first gap that I identify and that I try to address through my research is this, that what happens when we start to look at women's experience of social mobility? What does that tell us? Something that we already don't know. What is that? So the other part of not counting women or not understanding women's mobility experiences separately is that social mobility studies have this problem of what to do with the housewife. So what is the status of the housewife? Does a housewife experience any social mobility? Do we want to find out? Are we interested to know about what a housewife, what does that position entail? It is unpaid labor, it is unpaid care work, as we kind of see, and it's feminized, it's something that is considered as naturalized work. But what does in social mobility studies, how do we understand this position of housewife? So this is another blind spot that I have tried to kind of address in my research. The second kind of thing that I focus on is, yes, mobility is about movement. Mobility is about achievement or attainment and, you know, rise in income or changes in occupation. But what does this process feel like? What does the experience feel like on different castes, on different bodies? The experience of upward mobility must feel something. What is that embodied experience? What is that affective experience of making this, of pursuing aspiration or upward mobility? So that is something that I have tried to do in my research by producing an ethnography of social mobility, by understanding what it feels like for a Dalit woman to pursue education, to inhabit social spaces where they are not welcome, to seek recognition which is not being granted to them. So that is what I try to understand again through life histories and ethnographies through Dalit women's experiences. And finally, yeah, I see a hand.
I have a question. Is it possible to talk about downward mobility?
Yes.
And which causes it is happening?
Yeah, thank you. So again, mobility, like it's a really good point that you have brought up. So mobility generally also in social mobility, we understand it as one linear movement. We understand it as an upward movement. But in the case of a society like India, and in fact, even in the case of a society like UK, a lot of mobility is maintaining your position or protecting yourself from downward mobility. So in this particular hierarchy that you see, because Brahmins are at the top of the hierarchy, at the top of the pyramid, they are able to protect themselves from downward mobility. They are able to maintain their position, even if they are not able to experience upward mobility, that is change in income or rise in income or change in their class status, like moving from middle class to upper middle class, or becoming richer, or entering the top 10% or top 1%. Maybe even if that's not possible, they are still protected from downward mobility. They will not experience the same kind of economic shock. For example, if we just look at COVID, the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, the groups that were most impacted by the pandemic were the lower castes, were the peasants and laborers, and the ex-untouchable communities, the Dalit communities, who are already occupying low-paying jobs, low-status jobs, and underpaid jobs, precarious forms of work. They were the first ones to lose their jobs, and they were the hardest hit in terms of economic shock. That means that if they were at the poverty line or above the poverty line, this pandemic the shock was big enough to push them down the poverty line. So this sort of protection is available, safeguarding from downward mobility is available to castes that are higher, who have financial savings, who have economic security in the form of land, in the form of property, in the form of assets. So again, the caste structure you can see is experiential, is is emotional, is embodied, but it's also very material. It's related to a lot of like economically structural material things. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to continue with that, the last point, the last thing that I kind of look at in my research is when there are so many constraints to mobility for especially lower castes or for Dalit women, and for women in general, when there are so many barriers to experiencing upward mobility, how do they actually experience mobility? So I try to see this through agency, through the concept of agency. And agency in oppressive context. This is, you can refer to feminist scholarship of Sumi Madhak and several other feminist scholars who have worked on this concept of agency, which is to look at agency that emerges in constraint, in conditions of constraint, in conditions of oppression. So, I mean, the general stereotype or the general portrayal of Dalit women in sociological literature or in, conventional literature is that they are victims, is stereotypical understanding of, Dalit women are victims. They are victims of violence. They are victims of, oppression. They are thrice oppressed by caste, class, and patriarchy. And it doesn't show them having any capacity for any meaningful action, even though the constraints are many on their lives. And even though they live, in conditions of poverty, in conditions of oppression, it is still possible for them to show everyday forms of agency or everyday forms of resistance. And I try to see that and understand that through the lens of social mobility. So then I I thought I will tell you a little bit about the methodology, how I did this research. So this research is an ethnography, which is a lot of participant observation, which is to spend time to be immersed in this area called Chitrakoot district in northern India for about 9 months from December 2022 to like September 2023. But because I started my PhD during COVID, so everyone was panicking, how are you going to do research? How will you do qualitative research? Like if you cannot access the field, how would anthropologists do their research? So during that time when COVID started also, so I did have a virtual digital ethnography. So we started to meet online. We started to have conversations online with women that I started to know from the so-called field. So I spent some time, 6 months, talking to them, making a podcast with them. I can share links to the podcast that we created of that time. It is in Hindi. But I mean, I'm sure we can arrange for subtitles or it's possible to translate that. We produced about 6 episodes of podcasts and we made zines and, we wrote stories about during that time as a form of digital ethnography. So in 2022, I did end up going to the field. And what is interesting about my sample is that it is a sample of Dalit women who are educated, who have at least 12 years of education, and quite a few of them have undergraduate, graduate degrees in a predominantly rural district. So there are very few studies in social mobility about Dalit women in general, and whatever do exist are about Dalit women in urban and metropolitan areas and not in predominantly rural districts. So that is where I'm hoping like I've made a contribution by studying something that is difficult to kind of create a sample of. I based myself at this organization that Alberto was referring to in the introduction as well, called Chitrakoot Collective. That is an anti-caste feminist collective that is run and founded by Dalit women of that region, who had, some of the founders of that collective had a history of feminist movements, of anti-caste movements, building those in that particular region. So they founded this space, this collective, which was doing a lot of work around Dalit women in that particular district, working with rural women, working with different working class women, informal workers, with domestic workers, with construction workers, with informal kind of workers, with agricultural laborers, and all kinds of rural women that are to be found in any typical rural district in India. So I based myself at this particular organization, and through this collective, I was able to collect like a sample of women that I wanted to talk to. So I initially made a sample of 54 Dalit women to be a part of this research, through whom I wanted to understand what could social mobility mean to them, what it feels like, how do they make meaning and understand what it is, what do they mean by mobility. And out of those 54 women, I ended up doing life history interviews with 22 women. And out of them, 16 women I met multiple times. Like I had multiple rounds of life history interviews. And through that group, I arrived at a core ethnographic group of women that I spent 9 months with, tracking, sometimes living with them in their house, sometimes shadowing them at work, and then meeting them outside work, and kind of being an observer, an active observer in their lives and how they were leading it. And the women in my sample are all from Dalit castes, but they are from a particular, most of them are from a particular subcaste called Chamar. So again, as I said that, every caste is again subdivided into many castes. So even in terms of how education or how development is trickling down, you can see that some castes get more benefit and some are left behind. So even in my sample, you can see that the castes, that Dalit caste that did get benefited, did get the educational attainments and occupational changes, are belonging to one or two major Dalit castes, and a lot of the others are still having high rates of dropouts, school dropouts, and not being able to access even college education. So now what I'll do is very quickly take you through what my main findings were, because now we've understood what is social mobility, we've understood what social mobility means in India, what are the specificities of understanding social mobility in a caste-based stratified society, what problems does it show you, and how it complicates your analysis. So my main findings, the first finding I called, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm just going back to this. I just have this up. My first main finding, I call it a status trap. So remember I told you that social mobility does not know what to do with the housewife. It has a housewife problem, like what is the status of the housewife? So what I try to do is understand the process of becoming a housewife for Dalit women. So like I explained to you in graded inequality, that every caste or every group is simultaneously an oppressor and an oppressed. So the group that is above you are trying to imitate them. You are trying to adopt and imitate their customs, their traditions, their norms, their rituals, their practices in order to show that you can acquire that high status. So this is a process of status formation in social mobility. And in India, a theorist, a sociologist called M.N. Srinivas called it Sanskritization. So again, Sanskritization is associated with the Brahmin, the upper caste. So everyone wants to be the topmost caste, the uppermost caste, the Brahmin caste. So this process is called Sanskritization because again, Sanskrit was the preferred language of the upper caste and not allowed for the lower caste to access or to be able to use. So this process is called Sanskritization, the status formation process, where I, as a lower caste or a middle caste, am emulating the practices of a higher caste in order to gain status, in order to find acceptance. Now, one of the key elements of Sanskritization in terms of gender is when women are withdrawn from paid work to become housewives. So what indicates status for households is when a working woman is pulled out of work, out of the labor force, and installed at home to produce status as a housewife and to carry the status of the household. So the figure of the housewife is a status marker, is producing status, because the more feminine you are, the more chaste you are, the more traditional you are, the more obedient you are, the more you are in the household, holding the culture, the norms, the traditions of the household as a housewife, that elevates your higher status, because this is what is the emulation aspect of emulating a higher status. So the woman is not to be seen in paid work. Now that becomes quite difficult for Dalit women, because Dalit women are occupying the lowest strata, the lowest position in the hierarchy, which means that economic survival of their household depends on their labor. So they do not have the option of not being in work. But if Dalit castes have to show status, they want to pull women out. They want to put Dalit women out of work, and install them as housewives. But this process is never complete in the case of Dalit women. So in the process, on paper, it looks like, okay, Dalit women have married into a very sensible household, into a nice household, respectable household, where the Dalit woman is able to be a housewife. But that is realistically not the case because of the poverty that Dalit households are experiencing, and Dalit women have to be back in paid work. And again, if you see labor data, this is matched by labor data of Indian society, where you will find you look at the labor force participation of women in India, it's a U-shaped curve. It's a U-shaped curve, meaning low-paying jobs, Dalit women, predominantly lower caste, lower class women, are found in low-paying jobs, in domestic service, in informal work, in all kinds of jobs that are menial and manual jobs. And then there is a dip, there is a dip, which means that the middle classes are economically well off enough to pull women out of work and to have them as housewives. And then in order for social reproduction, they are able to do that. And then again, you see a spike which goes up, which is when women are highly educated, have very high qualifications, and are entering the job market at high levels, where they are in urban settings. They could be a higher caste, they could be mostly higher caste, where they're coming back into the workforce. So the Indian labor force, pattern for women's participation in labor force is a U-shaped pattern. So there is no option but for Dalit women to continue to be in work. So what exactly is the status of housewife doing? It's producing a status trap. So where we, like sociologists or social scientists, kind of see that becoming a housewife is a status marker. Oh, wonderful, your wife doesn't have to go out to work, and the respectability of the household depends on the housewife being at home. Is not really true. It's producing a trap. And what it does, it makes the surveillance and the policing of the woman a lot more within the household. The violence then that is visited upon the woman to behave a certain way, to be the perfect housewife, to be a good housewife, increases, because the status of a Dalit household is really dependent on the housewife looking perfect. They may not have the economics to show for it, but they want the housewife to look perfect. Let me try to explain it through an example, through one of my interlocutors. So I introduced Bittu as Kalavati's daughter. So Kalavati is a person who managed to achieve a lot of things on her own. So she educated Bittu has a graduate degree. So if you look at Bittu's life history, Kalavati as a mother was able to give her very good education, but that didn't translate into getting a job. But in her home, in her natal home, her father and brother, two brothers, controlled her movement and aspirations. The family married her into a very respectable, sensible household that understood the value of education, the value of an educated Dalit woman. But her husband was unemployed, so there is no financial economic security for the household. And her in-laws, her mother-in-law and father-in-law the family insisted on following strict traditional customs of caste and gender respectability. So what they do in rural districts, they imposed the parda, which is the veil, so to cover your face. They expected her to embody the virtues of femininity, of chastity and obedience, as I said. Every attempt that she made at pursuing her aspirations of either getting a job or of trying to pursue further education because she wanted to be a lawyer, or migrating from a rural district where there are no jobs to an urban area where she would find jobs, where her husband would find jobs. Every attempt of hers to try and improve her life situation was stopped, was thwarted by the family. She was kind of desperate for some autonomy, for some, what in Hindi she called khulapan, so like mental freedom, for autonomy. She was trapped into performing the role of the good housewife to produce status for the household, which was not accompanied by real increase in wages or real economic well-being. On paper, Bittu is married into a respectable family, but in reality, she is caught in a status trap. So Kalavati has actually defied all these stereotypes, and she's defied her family, she's defied her husband to pursue upward mobility through non-traditional routes. And she was actually considered to be a bad role model for Bittu. So her family was actively telling Bittu that do not be like your mother. Do not defy and do not do things non-traditionally. Be a good housewife. That's good enough for you. And don't try to follow the example of your mother. So again, here you see like a contradiction that Kalavati has managed to become upwardly mobile, has lifted her household into a better position, but she is not seen as a model worth emulating. She's not seen as someone that, oh, this is the status that she has achieved means nothing in the real world. So that's why if you now go back to, like, if I just remind you what Kalavati said, that yes, I have stuff, I have, economic security, I have a house, I have a TV, I have a cooler, I have an air conditioner, I have a vehicle, but I don't have respect. I am not granted recognition in my own household and then also outside the household. So this paradox of what women are allowed to do, what Dalit women are allowed to do or become, and what limits are set on them, that's like one of my, one big finding of status trap. The second, really, maybe I'll just get quicker now because I realize that it may be becoming too long. Is the role of violence. So again, in social mobility literature or anything that is studying inequality or social mobility, we generally don't talk about violence because it's a very positivist, progressive thing that, oh, upward mobility is good, inequality is bad, and like we need to be a more upwardly mobile society. But what is the role of violence in this? Like being Dalit women at the bottommost, occupying the bottommost layer of the hierarchy, and getting oppressed by every caste on top of that and not being allowed to move, that has to feel violent. You are experiencing violence. I'll give you one example here, not, I did think about 2-3 examples. I'll give you one example. This is an interlocutor that I met who's called Mahadevi. And she is from a village called Khutaha in that district. And Mahadevi is an educated woman. She is a graduate. And she's more educated than her husband. And then after marriage, she moved into her husband's family, into their house in the village. So Mahadevi runs a self-help group in her village. Self-help group is a partly government scheme that runs across rural districts where women are allowed to like participate, collectivize, mobilize, get together for various purposes. It could be for literacy purposes, it could be for financial literacy purposes. Usually it operates like a savings group. So a bunch of women in a village come together to form a self-help group, and they get fiscally trained, they get trained in financial literacy, and then they start taking out small loans. So it becomes like a little savings group where women are able to take out small loans by talking to local banks and to government bodies and applying for like government schemes for, purposes that are to do with their lives, for opening up small businesses, for opening up small businesses, or to like maybe buy a goat or buy an animal for in their villages, or to provide for their children's weddings. To organize their children's weddings, they would need a large sum of money. So that could be a form of loan. So this self-help group primarily enabled over the last, like I think from the 1990s is when, it has been introduced in India, all over India. It allowed women to get together, and it actually allowed Dalit women to get together, Dalit and indigenous women to come together and get literacy, get agency, get trained, and to get money to do a lot of things. So Mahadevi was heading one such self-help group in her village that was quite popular and that was running really well. Now that village is comprised of not just Dalit caste, but also upper caste. So upper caste women realized that this self-help group working very well, and they also wanted to be part of it. So they came and they joined the group. But because Mahadevi is a Dalit, and she was heading that group, she was the leader of that self-help group, and the upper caste women did not like to have the leadership of a Dalit woman, a person who is from a lower caste than them and lower in status. So what they did was they went and complained to their husbands in the village. And they kind of said that, this person, this woman, Mahadevi, is stupid. Mahadevi doesn't have the brains to actually do something complex like, train us in financial literacy. And she's causing embarrassment to her family. So then they complained to their husbands, and the husbands then approached Mahadevi's husband and said that, your wife is bringing embarrassment to your family, because in now, when the other women have joined, the higher status women have joined the group, we can see how stupid she is. We can see how brainless she is. And Mahadevi's husband then quietly talked to Mahadevi and said that, please resign and step down from this. We do not want to engage with this. Like, please come back and just take care of the house. And I met Mahadevi like a week after this happened in the village. And when I met her, she was bedridden. So this thing of her having to resign, being called stupid by the village, being called brainless, lacking in intelligence, it's something that is reserved for lower caste people. This is the way that lower caste people are seen and perceived, because historically they have not had access to education or exposure to better facilities or better environments. And Mahadevi had a headache and a migraine that refused to go away. And she was physically bedridden. She couldn't take care of her kids, and there was a little cot outside near where her, in her backyard of the house where her animals were living. And she was just lying there and saying that, I cannot bring myself to wake up and do anything. I mean, since the time I have been told that I'm stupid, I just feel like all energy has left my body. And this was something that I found across my field. This is something that I heard from multiple Dalit women who were humiliated, who felt exclusion, who faced abuses, who faced caste abuse, who faced misogynist abuse, who faced physical forms of violence, varying forms of physical violence. And in all their attempts to better their lives, to improve their life chances, they were facing this backlash, and which is unaccounted for in social mobility literature. Nobody is really asking you, oh, did you face violence when you got this educational degree, or when you got this job, did you face any violence? Nobody's asking anybody this. So to me, when women were telling me about how their experience was, the experience of violence was coming through. Every woman was saying that how much their body had to endure to make circumstances better. So that was one thing that I wanted to really foreground in our understanding of non-economic dimensions of social mobility, that what is the embodied experience, what is the affective experience of this really violent form of making your life better. And this is really seen from this point of marginality, where oppression is coming from your own household, oppression is coming from other castes in the village, and oppression is also coming in the form of economic oppression. So I'll try to skip over a few things. And the last point that I wanted to kind of make is in terms of agency. So now, I've tried to explain that how Dalit women's position at the lowest level in hierarchy makes it so difficult for them to move, to experience upward mobility. But what are the strategies? What are the modalities or sites of agency still happening? These are not like as liberal ideas of agencies, which are, acts of free choice. These are not. These are choices or actions that occur in oppressive contexts, in conditions of constraint, which is what the experience of mobility is like. So I have kind of understood agency as how Dalit women kind of talk about it. in terms of autonomy, in terms of seeking recognition, in terms of being able to experience fraternity that is collectivized. So again, a very, very brief example that I will give you is this story, this experience that one of my interlocutors told me. Her name is Prem Bai, and she was from an adjoining village in the adjoining district. And I met her at the collective's office. She was visiting one day and I met her. And I was talking to her and she told me about this custom, which is quite a prevalent custom in India even today. Like I told you, practices of untouchability continue to be there in new ways. So one practice of untouchability that, that was enforced in traditional times was that Dalit people were not allowed to wear slippers in front of upper castes. So if you are in the village, you are on the street walking and you encounter an upper caste person or a higher caste person, you have to immediately take off your slippers and have them in your hand. It's a sign of respect. It's like, to indicate your own lowly status. So this is something that you will think that, oh my God, this is 100 years old, like in kind of urban societies or where we're in the digital age, how stupid it is to think about that, you have to take your slippers off when an upper caste person is there. This practice is enforced in different ways, even today in India, in modern India, not just in villages, but even in urban places. So Prembai was telling me that, she was walking in her village and she encountered an elderly upper caste woman, a Brahmin woman, and who was walking with a stick. And, the expectation was that Prembai would take off her slippers and hold them in the hand. And Prembai didn't do that. She's like, well, I bought my own slippers. This is a public road. Why should I take them off? And the upper caste woman got angry and said that, don't you have any idea? Don't you have any sense that you're supposed to take off your slippers? And Prembai said, slippers are meant for the feet, not to hold in my hand. So that is what I will do. I will wear them. And that really enraged the old lady, the upper caste lady. And she took that stick and she whacked Prembai. And Prembai was quite taken aback. But anyway, that happened. And the elderly Brahmin lady went back to Prembai's household, to family, and told her mother-in-law and husband that your daughter-in-law is, defying us and has got these all modern ideas, and she thinks she doesn't have to take out her slippers, her chappals in front of me. That's so rude. And, there will be consequences. You will be economically boycotted if you continue to do this. And then the household came down on her and was violent with her, saying that your husband is going to lose a job if you continue to do this. And she said, you know what? The lady has a problem with me. You ask the lady to talk to me. Let them not talk to you. She has a problem. Let her talk to me. And in the meantime, what Prembai did was try to talk to other women, other Dalit women in the village, and tell them that, listen, we don't have to be removing our slippers every time we encounter an upper casteness. Because you know what we are doing? We are also part of reproducing this caste hierarchy. If we stop believing that this custom is where we are supposed to constantly show our low status, then there can be a change. There can be some kind of meaningful change that is possible. So again, this is one act. Then Prembai tries to get a lot of Dalit women to perform this, to carry on not removing the slippers in the village. It's a difficult process, and not all Dalit women do that because the kind of backlash that will come on them. So people want to avoid that. Status quo is okay. But then Prembai and her friends do not follow this custom anymore. Although this custom is prevalent in the village, they have decided they are not going to follow this custom anymore. I offer this as one example of the kind of strategies that Dalit women are employing, or agential capacities that they are exhibiting in order to navigate these very, very oppressive and situations of constraint, of mobility. So I'll kind of like close the talk so that we can open up for questions and suggestions and thoughts. Kalavati and a lot of other Dalit women in my sample describe the process of social mobility as being in a swamp, like trying to get out of a swamp, but you're stuck, but then you're still attempting to move all the time. So that's what mobility feels like for them. And that's not how we would understand that how women feel mobility or what social mobility can do. So why does this matter? What do we get out of like knowing these experiences? First, it tells us that social mobility is not a neutral process. Like anywhere, whether it's in India, whether it's in UK or anywhere else, it is based on the assumption that moving up or like experiencing a linear upward movement is a desirable thing to do. But the pathways to doing that are not necessarily kind of open and welcoming and non-violent towards everyone. It depends on, a lot of things on your location. And who gets to move, at what cost, and on what terms, these are very central questions that we must ask in terms of understanding social mobility, in terms of understanding inequality. And then the second thing is we need to care about this because we need to disaggregate about who we are talking about when we study mobility. So Dalit women are either will be assumed under the caste category or under general women category. Women generally, you will not study in social mobility. It doesn't matter what their labor market position is. So what I'm trying to argue for and trying to show that it actually does matter. And it is not confined to only the experiences of Dalit women or women, but different genders. I'm sure different genders are having different experiences of trying to get ahead in life. And the more marginal your location is, the more difficult the experience might be if we care to find out. And then the last thing is that it really asks us to think about that. What is social mobility for? What are we so interested in social mobility for? Is it just for better educational outcomes? Is it just for like occupational changes? Is it just for better incomes and status defined in these ways? Or is it about belonging? Is it about recognition? Is it about dignity? These are like larger questions that we must ask ourselves, that what our societies mean by saying that we want more social mobility. Again, Ambedkar has many thoughts around it, but maybe I'll reserve it for the questions and thoughts. I'd love to hear what you take away from this, what your experiences or understanding of mobility is in your own context. And thank you guys for listening to me for so long. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. That was great.
Long, and I hope it made sense. And it was
very complete, very well done, very well explained. So that's great, fantastic. Thank you. Bueno, si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta, comentario, yo también he preguntado si queréis hacer algún comentario de cómo funciona, por ejemplo, las cuestiones de movilidad social en vuestros territorios, en vuestros países. Si queréis hacerlo en inglés, podéis hacerlo en inglés. Si queréis hacerlo en castellano, yo hago la traducción.
Yeah, please feel free to express in Spanish, and I'm sure Alberto will help me understand it.
Right.
A mí me gustaría hacer una pregunta, pero tú la puedes traducir.
Vale, lo único que te voy a pedir es que si es muy larga la vayas partiendo, yo te diré,
Okay,
¿vale?
Perfecto. Me gustaría conocer más la percepción de Priyanka como perteneciente a la casta que nombró Lizan, creo que era. Lo que traducir es
Sigue, eso.
Más allá como de su investigación como india y perteneciente a esta casta, me interesa conocer qué ¿qué se sabe de las otras castas y cómo es la educación respecto a eso? Si es desde el desprecio, desde el desconocimiento, o si se es consciente de las desigualdades y la estructura opresiva que tiene su propio sistema, como una pregunta más personal.
Okay. Está bien. Muy interesante. So she's asking about your own position, right? In terms of you belonging to the Brahmins caste, and she's asking whether you can tell us about the reality of about how, for example, upper caste or the other castes know about the situation of the rest of the caste of the other particular castes. So, and what is your own position about that? So, what is your own caste knowing about the conditions of for example, the lower classes, the lower castes? Yes. That's no. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, that's a really great question. Just to talk about my own positionality is, yes, I belong to a Brahmin upper caste family, household, and mostly the time that I was growing up and I came into, pursuing education or employment, I had no caste awareness. I had no awareness that I was in such a privileged and advantaged position, and there were positions in the hierarchy experiencing such disadvantage and such lack of privilege. I was unaware of it, and I would not call it being ignorant, but I would just, it is actually willful ignorance. It is ignorance, conscious ignorance, that someone who is at a better position or an upper caste doesn't really care to know who is below them and why they are below them and how I am able to act superior to them. This has been quite a problem with our with Indian society as well, in the way that upper caste react to any forms of assertion, whether it is political assertion, whether it is social assertion, whether it is any kind of resistance that comes from the so-called lower castes or classes, especially from Dalits. Like, to be very honest, I am seeing Dalit women, particularly in my own household or in my own environment, as someone who is a domestic worker in my house. That is the highest that I am seeing in my highest level that Dalit women are able to achieve in my own, 40 years of life. I have seen domestic workers in my household, in my parents' household, come from Dalit and indigenous castes throughout my life, and their children who have been able to pursue better educational opportunities, actually transition from domestic work into salaried jobs, into professional jobs. It is so easy when they ever have holidays, for example. They have holidays or they have a break in their education. They are coming to do domestic work. They are coming to do manual work. That is not something that I can think that I will ever do. If I experience a break in my education or gap in my education, or if I have holidays and if I need to make money, I have so many other options to do that. And I have financial security to do that. But for someone who is coming from a Dalit background, the options are quite limited. And that is, again, showing me the limits of social mobility, that how precarious, materially precarious, their own economic, the lack of economic well-being still that continues in Dalit households. So you can be really very, very well educated. I have actually an example, an interlocutor in my field, a girl named Chandni, who had completed her graduate degree in economics, which is a big deal in the district that I was studying. It's a rural district, and economics is something that women just don't study. She's one of the very rare people, rare women, and that too a Dalit woman who studied economics. And she really wanted to pursue further studies, but because she was, the eldest of 7 children, so the responsibility of educating and preparing the household, doing that work, managing the household was on her, because both her mother and father had to be in work. Her mother was a domestic worker and her father was a shoemaker outside the railway station. And Chandni once told me that her mother fell ill, and she didn't have the luxury of taking a few days off, saying that, you know what, I am ill, so I have fever, I cannot to work for 2-3 days. If she stopped working for 2-3 days, some other Dalit woman would replace her and take her job. So she sent her daughter, she sent Chandni to do that work. And I met Chandni a day after that. She was crying and she was like, I don't know why, I feel so disgusted. I feel so disgusting. Why? I am an educated person and then I had to go wash dishes in someone's house. I felt so small, I felt so little. But that is actually the reality of being from a lower caste. This is the protection of, from downward mobility, as your friend was asking earlier. I am protected and insulated from such things. I don't have to pick up a bad job. I don't have to pick up a humiliating job where I feel disgust. And that is something that separates me from lower caste. And it's not visible. I will, as an upper caste person, I'll never get to know that, Dalit women are experiencing this or feeling this, because I really, as an upper caste, I don't care. That's the general attitude. I mean, I'm not saying that was my attitude, but I'm saying that's the general, that's actually, honestly, the attitude even in my household.
Gracias.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sí, lo intento.
Lo que ha contado de que como las mujeres a lo mejor de las castas medias, las que tienen todavía alguien por encima y alguien por abajo, como aspirar a simular la casta más alta a través del trabajo a través de ser amas de casa, pero, o sea, en plan de, si las de la casta más abajo sí que defienden una educación y un trabajo independiente y demás, o sea, como si... Es que no puedo entender la pregunta, me estoy guiando. Si sigue siendo realmente una aspiración para muchas mujeres ser amadas de casa porque eso representa ser parte de la casta más alta, o siempre como los estratos en las castas medias hay una independencia, una...
Perfecto. O sea, sigue siendo aspiración de las castas más bajas o de cualquiera, ¿no? Que quiera llegar a emular a las castas más altas, ¿no?
Vale. Pues emular a las castas más altas puede ir con un trabajo independiente de las mujeres, o parece que, porque ha dicho que luego realmente las de más altas sí que tienen una educación, entonces es un poco raro copiarlas siendo ama de casa.
Okay. Sí, perfecto, entendido, gracias. So she's asking about the U shape of a women working in a labor question in India. So she's asking what is the position of the women that if they are willing to be housewives in order to emulate the upper castes. And so that's the first idea of the question. So because she didn't understood very well the question of lower castes women going to work and not being housewives. So maybe you can explain, or I can explain her. And then the other question is if about the contradiction of upper caste women being autonomous, educated, and having their own jobs and quitting the avoiding being housewives. So that's two things that she's interested on having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
You understood? Did I explain it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is a really great question because the U-shaped curve if we were to understand broadly, it is how the first part of the U, I mean, I wish I had the graph to show you, is to start with, if we look at the labor force participation of women in India, again, it is one of the lowest in the world. So until a few years ago, it was around 25%. It is impossible to kind of, I think 25 to 30%, not more than that. It is really difficult to imagine that if we are saying that in India, only 25% of women are in the labor force. That is just impossible to think about. First, that is the problem of economic measurement. So once in the last couple of years, there are certain feminist economists who have done some work, and they have made measurement better to capture more how women are in work. And the percentage now has gone up to 40%. So 40% of India's women are in the labor force. Now, out of those 40% of women who are in the labor force in India, predominantly are in that first part of the U, which is Dalit and lower caste women, doing manual jobs, doing informal work. And again, one point to kind of understand India is, it is predominantly work is in the informal sector and not the formal sector. So informal sector is where you are not protected by labor laws. You are not in, professional jobs. You don't earn a salary. You don't get provident fund. You don't get insurance benefits. You do not come under that. So India's economy, while being somewhat agrarian still, is also predominantly informal. So a lot of work happens in the informal sector. So informal sector is predominated by women who come from lower caste and Dalit caste. So these are all the jobs of domestic work, cleaning work, sewage work, your first responders, nurses, which are all contractual jobs. They are not part of formal jobs within, as per government classification. So they are health workers, they could be health workers, they could be midday meal cooks, that is cooks in schools, government schools, providing meals for school children. Even that is not a formal job. That is a contractual, informal job. And a lot of work that is done in construction work. So if you understand, predominantly industry in India is in the informal sector. So that's why you can then understand that out of 40% of women that are in the labor force, predominantly those are in the lower, the first U curve. And then the question about what is being middle class in India. I mean, this is again a very favorite topic for social scientists. And being middle class in India is, again, to do a lot with social capital, status formation. And one of the ways in which this middle class status is formed or achieved is when women are not working. So a lot of the women, say, for example, in Mahadevi's village, so Dalit women were at work, in informal work, in agricultural labor, in construction work, migrating to nearby cities to do construction work, or picking up odd jobs when weddings happen to kind of, make the food at weddings. So they were contracted on those bases. But upper caste in those villages, women were not working. Women were doing labor that is within their household, that is doing the care work, that is doing the unpaid work of preparing food for the household, taking care of the household, doing the animal husbandry work that comes with the household, or, the food processing that comes with maintaining a rural household, or like a household, and more importantly, social reproduction, that is procreation. So middle class formation is very much about women not being at work. Although in urban India, that is difficult. All women, like women do have jobs. A lot of women do go into work, but women will not go into work, will make very strategic choices, will not go into work until the families are making sure that they have children and that they have a male child. So sometimes women will not enter the workforce despite having educational qualifications for years. And once maybe they're in work and they'll fall pregnant, they'll go on maternity leave. To come back to work takes a really long time. So that depression that you see is a lot of middle class women maybe wanting to be in work, but having to perform being a housewife and being contained in the household. And that is status production work. And this is a lot of social reproduction work. And where that goes up is when you have very highly educated women who have come from very wealthy backgrounds, come from highly educated backgrounds. So they are able to seize autonomy, which is coming to them much more naturally than how Dalit women get their agency or autonomy, or how middle class lives are ordained. So a lot of the women, again, that is very small percentage of women that will be in that So in that 40%, predominantly will be the lower caste workers, and then a very small percentage will be highly educated, who married up or who are not choosing to marry, who are able to make those decisions because they have moved they can be out of the control of the households. They do face backlash. Again, they will be judged. They will face backlash, but it's a different kind of backlash that they handle very differently. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but broadly. But thank you for that, because it's a very, very important question about, how different women are organized in like Indian, South Asian society.
Great. Again, thank you very much.
Thanks.
¿Hay alguna más que...? ¿Sí?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was wondering how the caste system impacts the diaspora communities. Members of a lower caste system, for example, who have left India, are they supported by those structures?
Thank you. Again, a very important question, because the thought again was that the communities that are able to travel and are able to become global populations, are able to go into more industrialized or westernized societies, will not carry these traditional feelings about caste groups or hierarchical groups. But that is not what we find. And again, we need to see the context of migration, where it is happening, and who migrated. So a lot of the times that in the UK, for example, initially the Indians who migrated to the UK would have come post-independence, or would have come much later to migrate for educational opportunities. And those would naturally be the upper caste who migrated, or would come from higher caste who migrated to the US or the UK. To the US, we saw a lot of migration happening because of the technology sector. So like a lot of the higher castes in southern India are engineers, pursue engineering or pursue sciences. And that migration you see to the US in the Silicon Valley or in different parts of the US, where highly educated upper caste families and people traveled. And it is only since 2000 when affirmative action policies kicked into universities in India, where a lot of lower caste individuals were able to access quality education and access education in the most premier universities in India, were able to then travel. But then you can see the presence of caste hierarchies even in the US. So the US in the last couple of years, if you will Google and follow the work of this organization called Equality Labs, they have been at the forefront of tackling caste issues in technology companies, in the tech sector in the US. So this case came out of a company called Cisco, and the problem of upper caste treating the lower caste with this amount of discrimination on practicing the kinds of untouchability or purity pollution norms appeared even there. It could be on the basis of your skin color, because already in US, there are forms of racialization that are in operation. In the UK, there are forms of racialization that are in operation. Again, in India, it's a little bit difficult because we are all different shades of brown. You cannot really tell the caste by phenotypical markers. Like you cannot tell by the color of the skin, like with a lot of surety, a lot of certainty that they belong to a particular caste, although those assumptions can be made and will be made. But there are other factors that give away. So we will always ask, oh, what does your father do? Or where do you come from? What is your native place? Where do you live? So these are all indicators for me to determine or to kind of find out what caste that they come from. If they are meat eating or if they're vegetarian. Again, there are these assumptions that I will make. Oh, meat eating, oh, maybe these are lower caste. So all these ideas, again, you find them in the US, again, you find them in the UK, where maybe the first waves of migration that happened were from the upper caste. And now when lower castes are coming in, you can see that friction coming in these societies. However, if you look at Caribbean or Africa, where lower castes were brought to these places by the colonial rulers, by the British, as indentured labor, their caste looks a little bit different, because it was lower castes who arrived as indentured labor to Africa, to the Caribbean, and then experienced mobility, because those societies are not caste-based societies. So they were the first migrants that arrived in these areas, acquired wealth, acquired like capital, acquired social status. So the way caste looks there is kind of different and also a little bit understudied. So I cannot speak with a lot of expertise on that, but this is my observation from the UK and the US, that caste travels. Again, Ambedkar has a really great essay on how caste travels with communities. If, I can also maybe all the references that I made, maybe make a little list and send in case you're interested. Please refer to them. That will also help you.
Thank you very much. Ambedkar himself was studying in the UK and in the United States.
Yes, absolutely. At Columbia University and at the LSE. So,
exactly.
And he himself has so many experiences of caste to talk about, because he was also a Dalit. Although he came from an economically slightly better off position, but he still faced the kind of discrimination that, you would not associate someone who has a double PhD and a law degree to face.
Exactly. Great, thank you. Fantastic. ¿Había alguna? That's you had already to respond to that question, but there's another question here.
Okay.
Okay, I can practice my English, so I can bring it in English. Well, you are like interested in how it's in our countries about this thing in the mobility, social mobility. I'm from Ecuador, Latin America, and how you said it about like in the US is not practically the same, because we have like another colonial history, but we also have this class-based social, but with this like a base racism in the society, especially with indigenous people and with Afro-Americans people. But I was interested that in case that you said that that doesn't matter how is your color,
because in our countries you can be discriminated by your color of
yeah,
skin, right? So that's, and also you it's like kind of how say it, like different. That you said that in India it doesn't matter if you have education or if you can actually stand in a university education, because in our countries the base like the mobility social becomes if you have the opportunity to study.
yeah.
Because like in this case are different. But I have a question for you. In the proof that you said that, how can I say it in English? And the political movements of the activist movement of, in this case, of women who's activists and working from these anti-caste things. How is seen in the political forms? I don't know if you can, or is all first like in the social movement, and it can up to a political policy or a political thing, or maybe first is like in the social way. I don't know if you understand me.
Yeah, I do. I get your point. Again, a very important question that how do you tackle caste politically? And unless and until it is a Dalit or an anti-caste or lower caste political formation, caste is never the center of a broad political struggle. And in terms of like just political parties and how anti-caste frameworks or anti-caste struggles appear, you know, for the longest time, I don't think annihilation of caste or removal of caste has been at the center of our political struggles. Whether it is like from the time we got independence to now, but then since the 70s, since Ambedkar, we've had some very key political formations, parties, political parties that have come around this idea of dismantling caste structures. So one example from the state that I studied in is the Bahujan Samaj Party. And with that party's domination in the state, it gave us the first Dalit woman chief minister of a state. And that was a huge symbolic victory for Dalit people in the country. And I mean, the political movements have happened since Ambedkar's time in southern India through Periyar, and continue to happen. But I think the problem has been that Dalit is not a homogeneous category. Like I said, because it's graded inequality, so different Dalit castes also practice caste discrimination with other Dalit castes who they consider to be hierarchically lower or like or who are above them. So to unite, to have social cohesion and to have a homogeneous Dalit label or the flag under which they will all fight, or you know, like and will mount an anti-caste struggle, has been quite difficult to achieve. And because of graded inequality, I mean, there are Dalit castes, there are indigenous castes, and in the middle, there are all these middle castes, which are called the other backward classes. And Indian politics has always tried to, you know, play these caste politics, to say, to pit one caste against the other. Because we are graded in our hierarchy, it is easy to do that. So political formation have taken these caste formation. So certain political parties are upper caste parties and they get all the upper caste votes. And then now if I have to appeal and increase my base, like how the majoritarian right-wing government has done very nicely and continues to do so since 2014, what they have managed is to unite all these lower castes under the Hindu umbrella, to say that let's have a Hindu identity and all of you can experience mobility or prosperity or progress if we unite under the Hindu umbrella. So they have been very strategic and clever about uniting under this umbrella of Hinduism or Hindu religion or Hindu identity, like a religious, politico-religious identity, rather than Dalits uniting under an anti-caste identity. Politically, the other thing has been more successful, as we are seeing with the populist government. But that doesn't mean there's an absence of anti-caste struggles. It's just that it's very difficult.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thanks a lot. Una pregunta más. Bueno,
Yo tengo otra pregunta.
una pregunta. You still have time for more questions?
Yes, I think I have a little more time and then maybe I will have to make a move, but this has been fantastic. Like, I'm just very happy to engage.
All right. So, yeah, okay. So, some quick questions and then we... So, that's great. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. ¿Tienes que hablar más fuerte o acércate? She's speaking English, so she's...
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. I'm sorry if you already touched this point, but and you just said that the religion is a big point of the caste system. So, from someone who look at India from the outside, I'm very curious about how in a globalized world can this can this be permanecer como can this be remain and for all this time?
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, again, a very important question. And this has been the understanding of India from colonial anthropologists or Western sociologists in terms of understanding India. And one of the most seminal works of sociology that I can refer to is Louis Dumont, who was a French anthropologist who wrote this very seminal work on India called Homo Hierarchicus. And he was like, India is a hierarchy-based society as opposed to the Western society where it is about homo equalis. So somewhat like, equality is something, egalitarianism is a part of the thinking of the Western society. And painting India as a traditional monolith society that derives a lot of the ideology from a Hindu cosmology. So I think it is difficult to contest that, because even today, one of the reasons for the persistence of something as antiquated and as old as caste, or like, something so ridiculous as a caste stratification, or caste-based hierarchy, it feels like, why is it so relevant? Why do people care so much about it? Why are they following it? And the relevance of it, the conditioning of it does come from scriptures, does come from the religious texts and scriptures that have been composed or written thousands of years ago. Again, a lot of scholarship tends to look at the Rig Veda or Manusmriti as places from where ideas about caste are really, coming through, about who is pure, who is impure at the extreme ends. That is the textbook kind of picture about India, but it is a lot more complicated than that. That hold of religious ideology is there, but it is far more complicated than we have ever studied. So it has never been that case where, caste is something that is so hierarchical and so rigid. There has been contestation throughout. understanding of that Indian society doesn't have a concept of equality and it only has a concept of hierarchy is something that is, again, so contested. Now people are beginning to revisit history, relook at history, relook at coloniality also in that. And I think in some ways, the right wing also has kind of polarized this debate by saying caste is a Western construct. It was given to us by the British. You know, before British, we didn't have caste. We didn't have this kind of this thing. What I think the important point to the note here is that the way caste is classified now in order to understand Indian society, that was done by British. That was a colonial product. But the hierarchical elements or caste practices or the three bases that I was telling you about, ideological, economic, and social, did exist. But a lot of contestation also existed for that. A lot of intermarriage also happened for 2000 years before, you know, colonialism constructed it in a certain way and then rigidity again happened. So it is, if we look at historically studying it very seriously, it is a much more complicated and evolving dynamic picture than what our understanding is, that, oh, this is a caste-based society, it has always been like this and it never changes. I don't know if I've kind of answered.
Yes, but this system is like justified by the religion, because I know just a bit about the religion, but I know it used to think in the reincarnation. Reincarnation.
Yeah, like karma. Yeah.
Yes, like the karma. So what I know, I don't want to be disrespectful about this, but what I know is that if you are born in some caste, it's because you were bad person or something, and it's your karma, your and I heard that that's why the caste justify. Obviously, the power from the upper caste needs the lower caste status. But I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. This is actually the religious understanding, the ideological understanding of caste that derives its importance and its significance in these theories of rebirth and, you know, of sins that you might have committed, and which is dictates where you are born and what you cannot escape from. It's like an identity ascribed to you from birth. But what this kind of reading does is it is obscuring the other material basis of caste, which is why actually it survives. A religious understanding and a ideological hold can weaken, because right now in modern Indian society, a lot of in urban areas, people do not have such a strong you know, ideological hold of caste, yet they practice it in some other ways, because this system has an economic reasoning. It has a social reasoning for a graded nature of hierarchy to remain, because I gain advantage by practicing caste. So I want to hoard privileges. I want to hoard opportunities. I want to keep something so that I can experience that kind of status and keep my high status. So the way I experience advantage and privilege gets hidden if we say it is you know, given in our religious ideology. That is the danger of doing that. Yes, it has a basis in that. You cannot understand why it is important or why it sticks even when you convert out of Hinduism and become Christians, as a lot of Dalit people do. They become Buddhists. Like Ambedkar himself converted out of Hinduism because he was like, I have no escape in Hinduism. But it doesn't mean caste has left you. It follows you even in a different religion in an Indian society. So that actually shows that the basis of caste is not purely ideological.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for asking this question.
Great, Priyanka. That was great.
Es cortita.
Last short question.
Okay. Okay, no problem.
All right.
Por miedo como a reducir por ahí ideas. Pero la situación con los Dalí, ¿se puede considerar como de apartheid o no? ¿Y por qué no? ¿O sí?
So she's asking a short question, which is in reality a long question. She's asking whether the situation of Dalits can be considered as an apartheid or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if you will read anti-caste scholars, if you will read Ambedkar himself, caste is a form of apartheid as well. It is because there is, again, an economic basis and a social basis. Segregation happens, wage discrimination happens, and boundaries are drawn on marriage and common cell practices. Yes, it is definitely a form of apartheid. I would not argue against that. And I think if you look at the marginal locations, which is like looking at from the point of view of Dalit communities or groups, they will call it apartheid, but upper caste will not call it. So there is a form of castelessness, caste blindness that higher status or higher caste groups can articulate, whereas if you are a lower caste, if you're a Dalit, if you are an indigenous group, then you will feel that as apartheid. You will experience that as apartheid. It is not legally classified as such in Indian society. The only thing that they have outlawed is untouchability. But, you know, it's something really to think about.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. It was great presentation.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you so much for listening and engaging. I mean, I'm so honored to actually be able to talk to you. Like, I've never done this before. So I'm just so happy that
it seems you have done it your whole life. So
like, I'm really
there was
glad.
A last question, but I'm not sure there's...
Yeah.
That's one last question.
I practice my English. Actually, maybe if you understand me.
No problem.
I have a question about a really important point you say. It's about when you say the little woman told about I feel really, really bad when we work in domestic or maybe when the little women have a housewife, yes, paper, for example. What do you think about, because sometimes we talk with our friends or sister, and in this time it's very difficult to talk about for the older generation, for example, our grandmothers or our moms. What do you think is maybe it's a shame? Is a social shame now, or maybe it's because now the woman is more social or critical conceptions, or what happened in this case in India? Because I'm really curious about that point, because it's very important.
Yes.
Especially is what happened when you okay. It's especially important because when you live in a oppression structure, it's very complicated. About that. Sometimes it's very difficult to talk about that structure. But I'm very curious about that question or that what you say after.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, that I think is a very important question. And if I'm understanding you correctly, I think the first thing that at least some of us in social sciences have begun to understand is, and this is also true of history, historians have begun to understand, is the way Dalit women have been portrayed in our understanding or in our sociological, anthropological, historical literature, is that they are always seen as without agency or seen as having only a one dimension of victimhood, of being oppressed, of facing as subjects of violence. We have historically never acknowledged or seen them as actors who can shape political processes, social processes, and as actors who can do things about it, which is why a lot of the understanding about Dalit women did not come from social sciences, has not come from history. It has actually come from literature. It is when Dalit women have written their own autobiographies and Dalit women have written in their own regional languages and not even in English, have written about their participation in political movements. Even all the workers' movements that have happened in India have seen the most participation from Dalit women because they constitute the labor force. They constitute the predominant 40%. So they are working class as well as being Dalit. So their participation, their understanding, their articulation of this and their understanding of oppression has never been foregrounded or centered in our social understanding, political understanding, or historical understanding. So the first thing that Dalit women have done is to retrieve that, is to claim that space, that they are also people who can tell the story of the nation through their own experiences. And it has arrived in literature. It has arrived through memoirs and autobiographies and poetry. It did not arrive in the social sciences. So now we are catching up to retrieving and to reclaiming these narratives that Dalit women have always had about oppression, about talking. So women currently that I interviewed are contemporary women who are able to talk about it because their mothers, their grandmothers, their ancestors also talked about it. It's just that we never took notice of it, or we never gave it the space that it needed to be given. And that is a corrective that is happening in social sciences right now. Not enough, not nearly enough, but the trajectory is very similar to, if you think about Black feminist theory. I mean, I see a lot of parallels between Black feminist theory and Dalit feminist thinking. I mean, I hope I understood your question correctly and was able to give you an answer.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Priyanka. That was great.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you so much.
We'll keep in contact. We will give you
Yes, please. I would love to hear from everyone about more things that they are doing and they're interested in, what, things that not are about my research, but about their own research and stuff. Like, I'd love to hear that.
We'll keep
love to.
about this
Yes.
conversation. That was great. Okay, so thank you. A big clap to...
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so just let us know and we will keep in contact.
Yes, thank you, Alberto. Thank you so much.
Bye, thanks a lot.
Bye. Bye, guys. Have a good day.